I never believed in the supernatural. Ghosts, spirits, and things that go bump in the night. They were just stories to me, tales whispered in the dark corners of imagination. That is, until that fateful night at the Cineplex Theater in the heart of Portland, Oregon. I was a college student, struggling to make ends meet. The only job I could find was at the Cineplex, and I took the graveyard shift as a projectionist. It was a strange, lonely job. Theaters are vibrant during the day, but at night, they become a haunting labyrinth of empty seats and dimly lit corridors. The Cineplex was a massive complex, boasting 10 theaters, each with its own quirks and secrets. My job was simple: load the film reels onto the projectors, start the show, and occasionally fix any technical glitches that arose. But as the nights grew darker, so did the atmosphere within the theater. One evening, I was assigned Theater 6, an older screening room tucked away at the end of a long, winding corridor. It was a strange room, always cooler than the others, with an odd smell that clung to the air like a persistent shadow. I had heard whispers among my colleagues about Theater 6 being haunted, but I dismissed them as mere rumors. As I entered the theater that night, a shiver ran down my spine. The air felt heavier, and the silence was more profound. I shook off my unease, reminding myself that it was all in my head. I loaded the film onto the projector and started the show. It was a midnight screening of an old horror movie, a fitting choice for the eerie ambience. As the movie played on the screen, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every time I glanced around the theater, my heart raced, but I saw nothing. The minutes dragged on, and my nerves grew increasingly frayed. Just as I was about to dismiss my paranoia as sheer exhaustion, I noticed a flicker in the corner of my eye. I turned my head, and my heart stopped. In the back row, a figure sat hunched in the darkness. The details were obscured by the shadows, but I could make out an unnatural stillness. Fear gripped me, and I stumbled back, knocking over a pile of film reels. The clatter echoed through the theater, and the figure jerked its head toward me. Frozen in terror, I watched as the figure rose slowly from its seat. It wasn't human, at least not anymore. Its limbs were elongated, and its body contorted in ways that defied nature. Its eyes glowed a sickly yellow, fixated on me. It started moving toward the exit, a disjointed, unnatural gait that made my skin crawl. I wanted to run, to flee the theater and never look back, but my legs wouldn't obey. It was as if I was trapped in a nightmare, unable to wake up. The figure was almost at the exit when it turned its gaze toward me once more. Its mouth opened, revealing rows of jagged teeth, and it let out a guttural, inhuman sound that reverberated through the room. I finally found my voice and screamed, a primal cry of terror that shattered the silence. The figure paused, its head tilting slightly as if studying me. Then, with a sudden burst of speed, it lunged toward me. I managed to tear my eyes away and sprinted out of the theater, my heart pounding like a drum. I burst into the main corridor, gasping for air, and stumbled into the security office. I babbled about what I had seen, my words tumbling over each other in a desperate rush. The security guard, a burly man named Mike, listened intently, his brow furrowing. "Slow down, kid," he said, his voice calm despite my hysteria. "You saw something in Theater 6? I nodded, unable to form coherent sentences. Mike stood up, his expression serious. "Stay here," he ordered. "I'll check it out." I watched as Mike disappeared down the corridor, my anxiety growing with each passing second. Minutes felt like hours as I waited, the weight of the encounter still fresh in my mind. Finally, Mike returned, his face pale and his eyes wide. "There's no one there," he said, his voice trembling slightly. I couldn't believe it. I had seen the figure with my own eyes, but now it was as if it had vanished into thin air. Mike placed a hand on my shoulder. "Listen, kid, this place has a history," he said. "Strange things have happened here over the years. You're not the first to experience something like this." He went on to tell me about an urban legend surrounding Theater 6. Decades ago, a deranged man had entered the theater during a late-night showing and attacked several patrons before being subdued by the staff. The man had died in police custody, but his malevolent spirit was said to haunt the theater, seeking vengeance. As the nights went on, I couldn't shake the memory of that night. The figure, the sound, the feeling of being trapped in a nightmare, it all haunted my thoughts. I tried to convince myself that it was a trick of the mind, a result of exhaustion and stress. But deep down, I knew that what I had seen was real. I requested to be moved to a different shift, anything to avoid the theater at night. But the unease remained, a constant shadow that followed me wherever I went. I heard whispers from other employees, stories of strange occurrences and eerie encounters within the Cineplex. It seemed that Theater 6 wasn't the only place touched by the supernatural. Months passed, and I tried my best to move on. But one night, as I was leaving the Cineplex after my new daytime shift, I glanced back at the building. Theater 6 stood there, a silent sentinel, a reminder of the horrors I had witnessed. And as I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me from within its darkened walls. To this day, I am haunted by that experience. I've never set foot in a movie theater again, and I avoid horror movies like the plague. The rational part of me still insists that there must be a logical explanation, that the mind can play tricks on us when we're tired and vulnerable. But deep down, I know the truth. There are things in this world that defy explanation, forces that exist beyond our understanding. Whether it's the malevolent spirit of a deranged man seeking vengeance or something even darker, I've learned that sometimes, the line between reality and the supernatural is thinner than we'd like to believe. And as I lay in bed at night, staring into the darkness, I can't help but wonder what other horrors lurk in the shadows, waiting to be revealed. It was a cold winter's night in New York City, and I found myself on the late shift at the historic Broadway Cinema, a place that had seen better days. The theater was nestled between towering buildings in the heart of Manhattan, its neon lights flickering weakly against the surrounding darkness. I had taken the job out of desperation, a struggling actor trying to make ends meet while chasing my dreams in the big city. The theater had an eerie charm to it, with its grand marquee that boasted of the latest movie releases and its faded red velvet seats that had seen countless patrons come and go. On most nights, it was a lively place, but tonight was different. Tonight, I was all alone in the cavernous expanse of the cinema, with only the dim glow of the exit signs to keep me company. The clock struck midnight, and the city's bustling energy seemed to fade away, leaving me in an unsettling silence. My task for the night was simple: clean up after the last showing and lock up the place. As I went about my duties, a chill crawled down my spine, as if someone was watching me from the shadows. I shook it off, attributing it to the old building's creaks and groans. The final showing had been a late-night horror flick that had left the audience in a state of nervous excitement. As I picked up discarded popcorn bags and half-filled soda cups, I noticed something odd: a trail of muddy footprints leading from the back row all the way to the exit. I followed them with growing unease, my heart pounding in my chest. The footprints seemed too large to belong to any ordinary person. I wiped the sweat from my brow and continued my investigation. The trail led me to the theater's basement, a place I had always found unsettling. The dim overhead lights cast long, eerie shadows on the concrete walls. I hesitated at the top of the stairs, my flashlight cutting through the darkness as I descended. The air grew colder, and a feeling of dread settled over me like a heavy blanket. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, my flashlight flickered and died, plunging me into complete darkness. Panic gripped me as I fumbled for my phone, using its feeble light to guide my way. The trail of footprints seemed to vanish into thin air, and I was left with a sense of foreboding. It was then that I heard it, a faint, whispering voice that seemed to come from all directions at once. "Welcome to my stage," the voice hissed, its words echoing in the confined space. I froze, my heart racing as I strained to see anything in the darkness. "Who's there?" I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. There was no response, just the sound of my own ragged breaths. Suddenly, the overhead lights flickered to life, revealing a figure standing at the far end of the basement. My blood turned to ice as I saw him, a man dressed in tattered clothing, his face obscured by a grotesque mask. The mask was twisted and contorted, its features frozen in a sinister grin. In his hand, he held a wicked-looking knife, its blade gleaming in the harsh light. I stumbled back, my mind racing as I realized that I was trapped in the basement with this deranged figure. "Stay away from me!" I shouted, my voice trembling with fear. The man tilted his head, as if considering his options. Then, with a sudden burst of movement, he lunged toward me. I turned and sprinted up the stairs, my heart pounding in my chest. I burst into the theater, my breath ragged and my body shaking. The empty seats seemed to mock me, and I realized that I was trapped in a nightmare from which there was no escape. I glanced around, hoping to find a way out, when I heard a chilling laughter, the same voice from the basement, now echoing through the theater speakers. "Run, little actor, run," the voice taunted, its words dripping with malice. I bolted toward the exit, my footsteps echoing through the empty corridors. The laughter followed me, growing louder and more sinister with every step. I burst through the exit doors, stumbling out onto the street. The cold air hit me like a punch to the gut, but I didn't stop running. I ran through the streets of Manhattan, not daring to look back. The laughter seemed to follow me, a relentless pursuer that haunted my every step. Finally, gasping for breath, I found myself in Times Square, surrounded by bright lights and the hustle and bustle of the city that never sleeps. The laughter faded, replaced by the distant sound of sirens. I collapsed onto the pavement, tears streaming down my face as I realized that I had narrowly escaped a fate worse than death. The police arrived soon after, and I recounted my harrowing experience to them. They searched the theater, but the man with the mask was nowhere to be found. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. The Broadway cinema remained closed after that night, deemed unsafe for both employees and patrons. The experience left me scarred, my dreams of becoming an actor replaced by nightmares of that masked man and his chilling laughter. I left New York City behind, moving to a small town in a different state, hoping to find solace and a fresh start. But even now, years later, I can still hear his voice in the wind, a haunting reminder that some nightmares are all too real. And as I pass by empty theaters in my new hometown, I can't help but wonder, is he still out there, lurking in the darkness, waiting for his next encore? It was a cold winter night in the heart of Massachusetts, and I was just a regular college student looking to make some extra cash. I had taken up a part-time job at the historic Blood Moon Theater in the quaint town of Salem. The theater was a relic of the past, with its ornate architecture and vintage charm. But little did I know, the history of this place held secrets far more chilling than any horror movie ever screened within its walls. My shifts usually began after sunset, and I'd work the night shift, cleaning up after the last showings. As I entered the theater that fateful night, I couldn't shake off the eerie sensation that I was being watched. The empty seats stared back at me like shadowy figures in the dim lighting. I shook it off as nerves and got to work. The first few hours passed relatively uneventfully. I cleaned up discarded popcorn boxes and soda cups, dimming the lights as I moved from one aisle to another. The smell of buttery popcorn lingered in the air, giving the place a strange mix of nostalgia and unease. Around midnight, I had just finished cleaning up the main theater and moved on to the smaller screening rooms. I had this unsettling feeling of being alone yet not alone, like someone or something was lurking just beyond my vision. Ignoring the feeling, I continued with my tasks, hoping to get through the night as quickly as possible. As I entered one of the smaller screening rooms, I froze in my tracks. A chill ran down my spine as I saw it, thick, crimson liquid dripping from the ceiling in slow, rhythmic drops. Blood. My heart raced as panic gripped me, my mind racing to find a logical explanation. Maybe there was a leak in the plumbing, or some sort of malfunction with the air conditioning. But deep down, I knew there was something far more sinister at play. I hesitantly looked around the room, my breath catching in my throat as I tried to find the source of the blood. My eyes scanned the walls, the ceiling, and the rows of empty seats. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it, a figure emerging from the blood-stained ceiling. But it wasn't a ghostly apparition or a supernatural creature. It was something else entirely. The figure was almost invisible, a distortion in the air that could only be seen because of the blood that splattered on it. It was as if the blood clung to an invisible form, outlining its shape in a gruesome and chilling display. My mind struggled to comprehend what I was witnessing. Was this some sort of hallucination? A trick of the light? Or was there something truly otherworldly happening before my eyes? I took a step back, my heart pounding in my chest, my mind a whirlwind of fear and confusion. The figure remained still, as if it were studying me, its unseen eyes fixed on mine. I felt trapped, like a mouse being observed by a predator. In a sudden surge of courage, I mustered the strength to turn and bolt for the exit. As I fled the screening room, the blood continued to drip from the ceiling, the sickening sound echoing in my ears. I burst out into the main lobby, gasping for air, my pulse racing. I looked around, half expecting to see the figure pursuing me, but there was nothing. Just the empty theater and the haunting memories of what I had witnessed. I knew I had to get help, to tell someone about what I had seen. But as I reached for my phone to dial 911, I realized there was no signal. Panic welled up within me once again, and I felt the weight of isolation in this old, secluded theater. I glanced back towards the entrance of the theater, half expecting the figure to emerge from the shadows. With no other option, I decided to make my way to the theater's office. Perhaps there was a landline I could use to call for help. The hallway leading to the office felt longer and darker than ever before. Every creak and whisper of the building seemed to mock my fear. When I finally reached the office, I let out a sigh of relief as I saw the old phone on the desk. I picked up the receiver and dialed 911, my voice shaking as I recounted the horrifying events of the night. But as I spoke, I realized something was wrong. The voice on the other end of the line was distorted, almost garbled, as if it were being twisted and manipulated by some unseen force. It was as if the theater itself was refusing to let me seek help. Desperation consumed me as I hung up the phone and turned around, only to come face to face with the figure once again. This time, it was closer, its form more defined by the blood that clung to it. Its presence was suffocating, its gaze piercing through me. I stumbled back, my heart pounding, my mind racing for a way out. In a surge of adrenaline, I rushed towards the emergency exit at the back of the office. I flung the door open and burst into the frigid night air. The moon hung in the sky like a sinister omen, casting eerie shadows across the theater's exterior. I didn't stop running until I was several blocks away, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I never returned to the Blood Moon Theater after that night. I left Salem and tried to put the horrifying experience behind me. But the image of that figure, invisible yet seen through the blood it left behind, still haunts my nightmares. I've never been able to explain what I saw, and I've never been able to shake the feeling that I'm being watched, even in the safety of my own home. The Blood Moon Theater remains a chilling memory, a place where reality and the supernatural collided in ways that defy explanation. And to this day, I can't help but wonder what other secrets lie hidden within its walls, waiting for another unsuspecting soul to stumble upon its terrifying mysteries.